Hey everyone, today I'm talking about The Pillars of the Earth by Michael Renick. Now, The Pillars of the Earth is a board game from 2006, takes about 90 minutes to play and is for 2 to 4 players. Now, worker placement games are huge in today's market. It really is a convoluted and crowded space of gaming. And this one is pretty much credited as being one of the forefathers of that genre. I can't really think of too much that predates it. Being 2006 of that genre. So I guess the question is, does this game hold up to today's worker placement games? So the theme of the game is based on a novel and a TV series, I believe. I don't know too much about that, but the idea is that you are collecting kind of resources and trying to contribute to building the cathedral. It's a Euro game. You're trying to get as many victory points as possible. Let's talk about how the game actually plays. So as I said, it's 2 to 4 players, and what you're going to do is you're going to have a group of little meeples, I believe 4 master builders, which are going to be kind of your worker placement aspect of the game. And you are going to originally start the game with a group of different cards, and those cards do different things, such as converting different resources into points. And that's going to be how you're going to get your points, because you might have these cards that say convert 2 sand into 1 point, and you can do that, say, 3 times. And the same applies to wood and stone and stuff like that. And as the game goes on, you're going to collect more of these cards and get slightly better ones. Maybe instead of converting 2 resources into 1 point, you might be able to convert 1 resource into 1 point and do it more times. And that's kind of how the game's going to kind of scale and cadence throughout the game and kind of pick up pace and snowball to get more and more points as you go. But as I said, you're going to start with a big group of meeples, and there's going to be 7 cards out of a few more that go out face up, and then you're going to take turns kind of collecting those cards. And those cards are going to cost a certain amount of meeples. So some might say pay 7 meeples in order to get 4 sand. And you're going to take turns like that. And not only are you going to use that to get new kind of resources, you're going to use that to get improved cards as well, as I said, to get these ones that convert X resource into X points. And they're going to cost you coins. So once that's done, any kind of spare workers you've got are going to go onto a worker place on the board, which gets you money. Money's important because it kind of can help you prioritize you placing your workers with your master builders. So as I said, once those cards have been collected, you are going to go onto the main phase, which is the worker placement phase. Everybody's worker is going to go into this bag, and you're going to blindly draw your master builder or a master builder from the bag and place it on one of these spots on the board. And the sooner you draw out those workers is the sooner you can place them. But if you're quicker to come out of the bag, it means you're going to have to pay more in order to play that worker straight away. So say I drew my meeple out, or my master builder out. It would go on the 7th spot, and I could choose to either pay that 7 coins to place my worker straight away and obviously get priority, or wait until the next person comes out and they'll cost them 6, and then 5, and then 4, and then 3. And obviously they can choose to use that, or to pay that action to go first or not. And once all those draws have been done, they're just going to go through in the order they were drawn, but it's going to be free. You've got that. I love that kind of balancing of, I can go quickly now and get the spot I really want, but I'm going to have to pay for it. And the balancing is quite cool as well, because obviously if it's going to be cheaper if you're drawn out last, but again, you're going to get last priority. So a really nice kind of, a nice way of balancing out, as I said, how much you're spending and the prioritization of getting the worker placement spots you want. So let's talk about what some of the spots do. So every round there's going to be an event that comes out, and like with a lot of games now, you're going to be like a positive event, such as getting resources, or not having to pay as much tax and stuff like that. Or you're going to get a negative event, which is going to obviously be bad things. And there's one spot on the board that you can go to, which lets you kind of mitigate that event if you want to, or if you don't want to, you can take metal. And metal is extremely precious, which I'll talk about in a minute. You can also choose to collect these like bonus cards to add to your tableau, and again, you've got X limit of cards you can have. I believe it's 5 cards you can have. And you're going to have to kind of carefully decide about which ones you're going to keep and which ones you're going to get rid of, because you're going to lose some bonuses if you get rid of specific workers or these worker cards. So again, there's 2 spots there, so you can collect 2 different cards. There's also spots where you can just get straight up points, 2 points or a 1 point spot. There's obviously all the different resource spots, for your sand and your wood and your stone, but that's already been decided by the card draft. And then you've got a tax kind of spot where you can go there and not have to pay tax, because if you don't go there, you're going to have to roll the dice and have to pay a certain amount of coins depending on that dice roll. The initial spot you go to, you also get an additional metal, but anyone following that just doesn't have to pay the tax. You've also got a spot where you can take some more kind of dummy workers for the next round, so you can get more mileage out of collecting cards. And there's also a marketplace as well, where you can buy and sell goods depending on what you need. A couple more card buying spaces to improve your engine, and that's pretty much it. So again, you're going to be just taking your turns, prioritizing on what you want, and ultimately at the end of each round, you're going to convert all the resources you've collected into points by using those different cards. And that's going to be basically the game flow. You're going to play that, I believe, 5 rounds. It might even be 6. Doesn't quite pop into my mind right now. But again, that's basically the flow of the game. So it's a pretty light game. There's not too much going on. As I said, the metal is important because towards the end of the game, more powerful cards come out, and the ones that kind of, as I said, in the final round, lets you convert the metal you've accumulated into kind of big points, which you're going to get a lot more kind of, a lot more jumpier point kind of divisions as you go on. But yeah, that's the flow of the game. As I said, it's pretty light. There's not a mountain of stuff going on. I would put this in the kind of gateway genre of worker placement games, and that's it really. I mean, in terms of its meaningful decisions, I think the worker placement aspect is pretty good, because I normally complain about a lot of these games where they're so kind of loosey-goosey, where you can kind of just do what you want anyway, because every kind of space balances out. If you can't go somewhere, you can always go somewhere else. But this one, there is quite a bit of tension to get the cards you want sometimes. If you really don't want to pay tax, you have to go to these spots, and to get that metal is extremely important. So those spots are quite, keenly sought after, which is quite nice. The initial kind of collection of those cards is quite important, because when you get the kind of better conversion cards, such as the 1-for-1 cards, you kind of find yourself going down a certain path, and then I think the kind of strategy kind of plays itself, because you just want to collect the, if you have a 1-for-1 conversion card, you're just going to collect that certain type of resource over and over again to get the most points every round. You can carry over, I believe it's 5 resources from round to round, which can be quite important, but again, it's not massively important, because again, you're just going to use those cards to convert straight into points if you can. So I think in terms of decisions that way about how you're going to get your points, it's pretty obvious. There's not a lot of different kind of strategies you can do. Basically focus on the sand, focus on the wood, focus on the stone, try and get as much metals as you can for the end game. That's pretty much it in terms of its pathways to victory. Balance of the game is good. I mean, all the strategies get a pretty balanced. The only thing that does kind of feel a bit weird is that the conversion cards, all the different resources have different costs. So the sand is a lot cheaper than, say, the stone, but the conversion cards are pretty much work the same, which is a bit weird, because once you're converting 1 stone into 1 point, why not just convert 1 sand into 1 point, because it's cheaper. But I suppose there's only X amount of those cards out anyway, so everybody's going to have to kind of be a bit more flexible if they can. I really do like that mechanism of drawing the workers out of the bag. I think that's what makes this game feel more unique than anything else. Other than that, it doesn't really stand out above the crowd. There are some different kind of mechanisms that feel a bit kind of a weird way to go about things. I mean, I don't personally like the card draft at the beginning, because it feels like it's an extra layer to the game that doesn't need to be there. It feels a bit more fiddly than it needs to be, and it could be streamlined just that one step more. And you also find yourself with really awkward kind of denominations of workers, because you might want I think you only have like 10 or 11 workers to start with. And if you buy, say, a card for 7, then you're left with like 4 workers left, and there's pretty much nothing you can do with those workers. So sometimes you find yourself not having much to do on your turn. In terms of the time of the game, I think it flows pretty nicely. I think an hour and a half. If it went any longer than that, then I wouldn't be happy, but I think it doesn't outstay its welcome too badly. Uptime of the game as well is not too bad at all. Turns are pretty obvious on what you have to do. Replayability wise, I don't think there's a lot of different cards you can have in the game. I think you're going to see the same kind of cards each game in and game out. So every game is going to feel pretty similar. You're not going to find yourself kind of going for wild strategies because they're just not there to explore. And kind of one of my main criticisms of the game is just the kind of, as I said, the kind of snowballing effect. It just feels pretty static because, as I said, the first round you're converting 2 goods into 1 point. The second round you might be converting, 1 good into 1 point 2 times. And then you'll be finding the third round you'll be 1 point into 1 good 3 times, and then 4 times, and then you might chuck a bit of metal in there. So again, it feels like it's not very interesting in terms of how you're going to get your points. It's always pretty obvious you're going to, get as many resources of a certain type you can and just spit them through the machine. And it's a bit rinse and repeat, and it just doesn't have that kind of, dynamic feel where you're really building towards something and getting huge points and getting a real kind of huge payoff to your investment. It's very kind of small gains. And, every now and then, if you're playing slightly better than the other players, you might just trickle along a bit faster than everyone else and get a few more points. It just doesn't feel like your engine is going where it needs to go, and it doesn't feel ultimately satisfying, in my opinion. Something good to say about the game, though, is that it does look wonderful. I think the board game itself the game board itself is lovely. I think it's one of the best looking boards I've actually seen of this genre. I really do like the way it looks. It has that kind of realism look to it, like that kind of micro drawings. It looks really cool, and the artwork is fantastic. The people kind of on the cards and stuff aren't so good, but the board definitely makes up for that. Component quality is absolutely fine, and the theme itself is pretty much standard Euro. I suppose if you're into the book and stuff, you might get a bit more out of it, but collect the resources and convert them into points in order to build the cathedral. Completely fine with me. I love my Euros. Nothing out of the ordinary there whatsoever, and the setup and teardown time as well is no issue at all. Overall, this is a game that I think it's not held up well in terms of today's market. There are so many more worker placement games that I'd play over this one, but if I was kind of rating it on its own merit, I would definitely rate it positively. I think it's a well-designed game. But again, with this market that's so convoluted, I just can't rate it as highly as it probably should get, because there are so many games out there that do this better now. I mean, even in that kind of gateway genre, this one I think has been, it's been replaced. I'd rather replace something like Lords of Waterdeep, or even like, to go really recent, something like Architects of the West Kingdom, if I was going to introduce a worker placement game to someone. That being said, I think this should deserve proper credit to be one of the forefathers of the genre. It holds up surprisingly well in terms of how old this one is. It doesn't feel like a really old game, but again, it doesn't feel like it's quite as good as some of the games that come out now. Again, if I was rating this when it initially came out, I'm sure I would rate it pretty highly. But considering I've played it after all those other games, then it just didn't kind of set me on fire. I would like to have seen that kind of bag drawing worker mechanism be put into a new game. I think that'd be quite interesting to explore with a different framework around it, but on its own merit, just didn't really interest me too much. It's a bit light for me, just a bit too static and a bit not really interesting enough. Again, I wouldn't really recommend it as a gateway game in terms of other games being out there. But yeah, it's certainly a finely designed game, and it's just very much, standard game, nothing really interesting there to really rant on about. So yeah, I can't really recommend this one. If someone suggested to play it, I would happily go along with it. I'm not going to be shying away from playing it again, because again, it's pretty well put together. But I'm definitely not going to be reaching out to or asking to play it anytime soon. So that's Pillars of the Earth. It's a fine game, gets about a 6 out of 10 from me. Certainly not bad in any context, but in a marketplace that's so saturated, this one just doesn't hold up as well as it could. So that's my thoughts on Pillars of the Earth. If you have enjoyed the review, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.